So when I started out in Blue 3, I started in a really small shop, and I finally graduated to a bigger shop, so I built a new shop about 3 years ago now. This is what the shop was when it was under construction. When you build a shop for building string instruments, you really have to think about how you want to set up your layout for your tools. You want to be efficient. It's got to be a very climate controlled facility too, because the instruments are very delicate. Wood wants to stay. You want to keep wood at a certain temperature and humidity, as your teachers have probably told you. So this is what the shop layout looks like. I've got a lot of wood tools in there. I am a hand builder mostly, but I do use a lot of saws, band saws, drum sanders, just to make some of the processes a little faster, because it can take a while to do everything by hand. So that's my my shop buddy. Gotta have a shop dog. It's really important. She gives me distractions. Helps me when I just clean the shop. So upstairs I designed it to do master classes, because I wanted to get back to my community in Weatherford, because there's not too much classical guitar actually where I live, but we're bringing it out there. So actually before the pandemic happened, we were having master classes up there and house concerts. Yeah, it was a lot of fun. I'm about to start doing them again actually, so it's so nice to see events happening again. So one of the first things that people want to decide they want it when they order a guitar from me is spruce or cedar. What do you guys play on mostly? You got cedar guitars? Do you know spruces? Cedar fans? Does anybody know the difference between woods? Okay, so spruces can be a little more bright than cedar. It usually gives you more colorings in the guitar. So the more advanced player, I usually put it on a spruce. Cedar top can be darker, a little more Spanish music, a little more forgiving for the player. So when I store the wood in the shop, it has to be stored correctly, just for humidity purposes. Make sure everything's real stable. And then this is the back and sides wood. So there's lots of different types of back and sides, and that does produce a different type of sound versus what you want to pick. So I usually tend to go for really hard woods. So like this is an African blackwood. It's a really beautiful wood to use. Indian rosewoods, you guys probably played on a lot of those guitars. It's really nice wood to use as well. So when somebody orders a guitar, I kind of go through the process with them. It's a lot of fun for both the customer and I. I pick out a lot of the woods that they want to choose from, and then lay out what the guitar is going to be like before I start putting it together. So it's kind of two guitars, one on the top there, one on the bottom. Watch my video there.
Yeah, okay.
Okay. That was easier. Oh, we're good now. Don't touch it.
He's trying to put your mic on.
Oh, okay. Is it not on?
No.
Yeah, just turn it up very quick. Yeah, probably just gotta get closer to it. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, don't worry about it. It's fine. I'll just talk loud. So I do a lot of scientific stuff and testing on woods. This is kind of what I'm doing. I have a little mic or speaker underneath this wood. Yeah, that's good. That's good. It uses a frequency generator, and I can actually find out what that wood is tuned to. So it depends on the thickness of the wood and the stiffness of the wood. And so that determines what I'm going to tune and the thickness of the top and everything. I make a double tops these days, which is actually like two pieces of wood sandwiched together, and you have a material called Nomex inside, and it's laminated together, and so it's a real modern way of building a top. So a traditional top just has one wood. So this is just a cedar top right here being tested for to be sure it's going to be good to use for a guitar. And this is kind of the same process I use, except the top is on the sides, being glued to the sides. Speaker's underneath the guitar, you can't see it. And these patterns appear at the height of the frequency that the top is tuned to. And they're called Chladni patterns. And I look for certain patterns for each frequency and stuff. So, and I keep a lot of data on that. it just helps me be more consistent when I'm tuning a guitar for somebody. So if Jagger were to order a guitar and he was like, oh, I liked, Chicho's guitar, I could look back at my data and go, oh, this is what I tuned to that guitar, and get really close. I can get within 5 hertz. It's pretty amazing how consistent it is now. So the construction process starts. I'm usually doing laminated lines. This goes on the inside of the guitar. So I'm gluing up lots of jigs. You can never have too many clamps building guitars. So that's actually what keeps the sides a little stiffer and allows me to insert the binding and the purfling channels, which you'll see a little bit later. So that's my Solera, or mold, kind of a jig that is used to put the guitar all together. I've built this specifically for a certain model that I use, and I've got like setup built into it, and it's got the raised neck feature built into it. So one of the first things I do is I bend the sides and I laminate them. And so a side wants to be, once you bend it, it always wants to come back to its original form being flat. So I'll laminate it to kind of keep it completely stable. I've kind of got a really nice philosophy in building that I want to take a lot of the stress out of the guitar, because I think it helps prevent cracks and actually makes the guitar sound a lot more open. So I've got a real fancy Cadillac bender here. It tells me the exact temperature I can dial into. It's got a heating blanket, and it's really nice. I never break a side or anything with this. It's wonderful to have. So that's kind of the sides bent, laminated, and I've got those purflings or laminated linings kind of installed, and I'm starting the process here. So once the sides are glued together with the neck block, I start working on some details. This is going to be this part of the guitar right here. A little detail I'm working on there. Go through the sides. Lots of chiseling. And that's kind of what it ends up being at the end of the guitar building process. So a lot of miterings go in there. So that's actually wood that's framing the guitar is called the binding, and the colorings are actually called the purfling. And then the center kind of arrows you see there is called a wheat motif, and I actually make that all by hand. So this is where I'm making my double top. So I have a specific jig that I route out a top, and it's quite a loud process, and it can get messy. That's me chiseling out the Nomex to fit inside the pockets of the top. So you can see it's a honeycomb material, and the whole reason I do this and I go to this much trouble to make a double top is to make the top lighter and stiffer, so the guitar actually vibrates better and be just lighter, more responsive for the sound, really. And I've had to build some really interesting jigs and machines to help me do this. So this is a vacuum press that I built, kind of looks like a fancy vacuum. And the top goes into a big Ziploc bag, kind of seal it up, and squeeze all the air out of it, and it really provides even pressure for gluing things like this. So that's just before I do the other side of the top once I get the Nomex glued in. So you can see the Nomex here, and you have to be really careful on the type of how much glue you want to use in the top, because you still want to keep this really light. So I measure out everything and weigh everything on it. Let's see. So yeah, that's the top being glued up. So that will be the full top. So you can see how thin the woods are here. The edge is one top, and inside is the Nomex, and that other top on the bottom. And it's very stable at this point. You can see that's a cedar top. You can see light goes straight through it. That's how thin these tops are. So usually when I'm doing that, I'm starting to work on details. So a lot of the purflings, the rosette materials, the guitar, and it can be a lot of fun process to watch. I've kind of just made several different types of wheat sticks over the years. There's a lot of tricks to it. So this is actually the rosette process going on here. This is actually the wheat motif stick. So yeah, that's what all that turns into at the very end. So once I get the top done, I start inlaying everything in the top where the rosette goes. So I usually do a nice burl, wood, whatever me and the customer decide, and then start putting in the purfling and wood motif. And I bend it with a really cool hobby iron, which is really neat. Carefully playing it level. And those are some of the rosettes that I've done in the past. So I try to do each rosette a little bit different than the other one. I kind of hate doing the same thing over and over again, because as an artist, you want to kind of push yourself to different things and try to do that for the customers. And then this is the Aztec rosette. So this is actually on this guitar. It's pretty interesting because this is a full mosaic rosette I've done. Instead of having a wood burl in the center, I actually used a lot of wood purflings, and we were trying to get an effect of the pyramids being 3D. And I managed to somehow create that. It took some time to figure all that out, but it was a lot of fun. And I really worked closely with this customer because his guitar had a lot of meaning for him. So after the top and the rosette are in, I started working on the braces. And I still use a fan bracing system. There's lots of different fan bracings, lattice bracings. You guys understand what that is? It's just each one kind of has an impact on how the soundboard, the stiffness of the soundboard, and how it's going to resonate, and how the sound is actually going to end up being when you play the guitar. So fan bracing is very traditional. I love using spruce braces for that. It's very stiff and light bracing. So that's just before the back goes on. The guitar's been tuned to this point. I'm about to close up the box, and things are about to get really exciting here. It's about to become a guitar. And this is a steel string bracing system, just to kind of give you an idea of the differences between steel string guitars, if you guys ever play one of those, versus a classical guitar. So the steel string has to be braced a little bit stronger, because those are pulling a little bit harder than the classical guitar. Classical guitar pulls about 100, 200 pounds of pressure, so you can imagine how much steel string is pulling. So that's kind of just fine tuning, being sure. Probably put the back on at this point. I'm actually just making sure this is where I want the guitar tuned to, and everything turned out correctly. Some pictures of before the back's on. So when I'm doing the back, I usually join two pieces of wood, so it's called book matching. So you have kind of when they cut up the trees, they have these big blocks, and then they cut them into smaller pieces, and you can book match them together, and so they kind of mirror image of each other. Usually the grain is nice. And I usually go for straight grain stuff. If you go for more figured stuff, it gets a little more crazy for cracks and everything. You gotta be real careful of that. I've been collecting woods for a long time, so I have a lot of stuff stored in my shop. So got Zercote on the top right there. African blackwood, a lot of African blackwoods actually with the sapwoods. This one looks like a candle. Or what do you guys think? What does it look like to you guys paying attention? I've heard a lot of things on that one. Kind of funny. Yeah. And then the back braces are put on, and that can be tuned just like a top. You can actually shave those down, and when you put weight on a top, it usually makes the frequency go up. When you take weight off the top, some shaving braces down, it makes the frequency go down lower. So that's kind of how we control that. That's a Go bar deck system, so it's just a nice jig to help me glue a lot of braces at the same time. It does produce a lot of pressure. I use different types of glue for different reasons. Sometimes it's your Home Depot Type Bond glue that you can get, or I use a hide glue, which is a very traditional glue. You kind of heat it up about 145 degrees, and then you have to work really fast with it. The old Spanish guys used to use a really hot shot just to keep because that's mainly the glue they would use for everything. So they have to work really fast in a hot shop just to keep everything from gluing up too fast. Nice little plane, kind of shaping the back braces, scalloping them down to where I need them. And then everything gets a nice cut of shellac. So it's a little bit of what we use to kind of French polish the guitar later in the process. So that is it back being glued up. You can see how many clamps I need just all around that. And I'm also setting the neck angle here and just making sure everything's aligning right where I need it, because that kind of goes up with the setup of the guitar and makes things a lot easier to play. If you don't hit that just right, you can get to a lot of problems. The customer will come back saying, my neck angle's all off, my guitar's not playing right. This is a very important part of the guitar building process here. So this is where I'm doing the binding and purfling channels. So I route out 2 channels here. And usually use a laminate router with a couple of very specific routing bearings and router bits. Making sure all the miterings are fitting correctly before I glue them in. And this is another process that has to be done relatively quickly, and I usually try to get the whole binding and purfling scheme in within about 10 minutes. So you have to kind of set up everything correctly, having tape everywhere, and everything gets wrapped up in big rubber bands. So that day I did 3 guitars, so you can imagine how tired I was. It was a lot of work. So what this does is it actually kind of makes everything tight, gets rid of all the gaps, and hopefully when you're done it looks like this when it's sanded down and scraped. That's a maple back inside. It's a really pretty guitar. The guitar is really not that deep on this. Picture's weird. So this is the neck building process. This is one of my favorite processes because this is actually where you get to shape the neck and you do a lot of hand carving. So if you like to do that, it's a lot of fun. So I'm making the neck blocks here. I use carbon fiber rods inside the neck because when you're pulling on a neck, it likes to bend sometimes with those strings. So I want the neck really stable. So I put these carbon fiber rods in there, and that does stabilize the neck a lot. It does help with the sustain of the guitar, I think, too, because when you stiffen something up, you get a little more efficiency in sustain. So that's a carbon fiber rod. I route out a channel, a little Dremel. Sometimes I'll put 2 in there, depending on the guitar and how stable the neck is, the wood I'm using. And lay a little piece of wood over it, and it's real stable at that point. Working on the details here, the head plate, clamping. So I use a Spanish cedar for the necks. It's a really nice, actually relatively soft wood to carve, and it smells wonderful. Like everybody always comes to my shop and goes, "What's the first thing I do? Oh, this smells good in here." It's the Spanish cedar mostly. That smells amazing. So I've kind of changed my headstock design a lot. That's more of a more traditional headstock right there. Fitting the tuners in the headstock, making sure they fit. And that's more of the modern one I use today. I mostly get the tuners from Italy. That's the only thing I don't make in the strings. Everything else is made by me. But he makes wonderful tuners in Italy. His name's Alessi, and they're really nice. Love the gear ratios, so they tune real smooth. So I use a lot of rasps and spoke shaves, planes, whatever it takes to get a lot of wood off the neck fast. And it's an art to carve a neck. to make, I mean, that's what you guys are feeling. That's when you first pick up your guitar. That's what you feel. You don't even play it first. You feel that neck, and you want to go, oh, this feels good. This feels nice. And then you play guitar, and that's when you usually fall in love with it. That's a spoke shade. It's a fancy plane just for kind of carving necks. I've kind of found some happy thicknesses and shapes that most people like, and I kind of do that, but I do tailor it to the customer's needs. I do look at their hands, their size. If you got smaller hands, I'll shape it a little bit different, and then we may change the scale length even. So I use traditional guitar is 650 scale. If you guys maybe plan on some smaller scales since you guys are a little younger, 640 I build a lot. And 630s can be for a child or a small, really, some of them really small hands can make a big difference on how the guitar plays. And so my neck is a removable neck, if you can believe it. So I have bolts, 2 bolts going through the neck, one in the top there. And I'm a repair guy. I see a lot of guitars coming with a lot of problems, and I definitely want to make my guitars easy to work on if something were ever to happen. And it does save a lot of time having a removable neck when something happens to a guitar. I've had a guy step on a guitar one time. Yeah, it wasn't fun. And it was in China. So he was calling me up, I just stepped on my guitar. I said, okay. Ship it to me and I will fix it, hopefully. And yeah, they came in handy, but actually fixed it and shipped it back to him, so it was all good. It is amazing what you can fix. Never just think your guitar is completely destroyed. I always talk to the luthier and see what they can do about it. It is amazing what repair guys can do. So. And you can see the raised neck here. So this feature right here is wonderful because we kind of call it the cutaway for classical guitar, but you can, when you become accustomed to it, you can move your thumb up there and play in those higher positions, higher registries, a little bit easier to play. And I found that adding that extra mass underneath the fretboard there, the sustain and the notes do sound a lot better than a traditional just fretboard going over the top. So I'm a big fan of that feature. I pretty much keep it standard, all these things on my guitar. Most people like them, and no one's ever said I don't want it. I usually just keep it. There's no reason to get rid of it. Some fancy neck joints. So the fretboard is a lot of fun. You get to slot a lot of fret slots, usually about 20 frets. I used to do this by hand. I actually have a saw jig now on my table saw. I can get one done really fast, and it's even a lot more accurate than this, but I did pay my dues with the saw. I think I did about 25 guitars, so it was a lot of frets to saw. So the fretboard is glued on the neck, and I use a slight radius. You guys probably have flat fretboards, but I use this real slight radius in my fretboard. You can come see this one when I'm done here and kind of take a closer look to it, but it makes, for me, bar chords a little bit easier. It depends on the player. Some players don't like a radius. They do a flat. I'll still do that if they want, but I just think the radius helps a lot. It's just enough where you can feel the difference. I'm putting my frets, or getting prepared to put my frets in here, and I do a lot of prep just before that just in case, like this is, like you're gonna want to get a fret job someday. Some luthiers don't prepare the fretboard correctly, and when you pull the frets out, the ebony likes to chip and everything, and it's hard to prevent that from happening. So what I'm doing here is actually preventing that from happening. If these frets were ever to be pulled out, that will not chip the fretboard. So I do glue the frets in, so you would have to heat them out to take them out. But it helps prevent, like a fret coming loose in the future. And then I put a fret marker. So you guys probably have a bunch of those on your guitars. See where you're playing on the guitar. Ask the customer where you would like those put in. File the frets down. Everything is leveled off, polished. think this is a video, me putting the frets in, yes. I'm those fast. I'm really good. There are different fret heights. You can get high fret, wide fret. Kind of got a medium high fret that I use on my guitar, just standard. The higher the frets, the more you can get a fret job done without having to pull the frets out. But sometimes when the frets get pitted enough and they just get really hard to play, then it's usually just have to pull them out and start all over again. Most of the time you don't have to get it done too often. So, but it depends on how much you play the guitar. I've had a customer literally need a fret job once a year because he plays so much. So, but most people don't need to have it for 5 or 10 years, just depending on the player. So at this point, the guitar is pretty much done except for the bridge. And I use a 12-hole tie block. You guys probably have 6 holes on yours. I use a 12-hole, and so that's to help create a different string angle on the bridge, and it's to get a little bit more power out of the guitar. And it just changes the way the guitar feels to play. So that's gluing the bridge on with clamps. I used to do it this way. This is a good method, but it does create stress in the top, kind of bends that top up, and I was always nervous because you spend a lot of hours building a guitar, and what do? You put a lot of pressure on that top and see if it's going to crack. It always made me nervous. So I decided to get this jig, since I had a vacuum press already, so laminating my tops. And so this actually squeezes the bridge down with vacuum pressure and doesn't make the top go up. It's a lot better. I just really enjoy this jig. It's so much easier than just putting a bunch of clamps through the hole and everything. So that is a bridge just put on and all finished. You can see how the 12-hole creates a little bit of different angle there on the saddle. So I've definitely done a lot of testing on tops. I'm really always trying to understand more about guitars and the way they work, the stiffness, what creates, sound transfer, energy transfer. I was like, this is kind of a great representation of a bridge. You guys ever seen one of these? And so when you put it on something like a guitar, you could act like this is a bridge. It's amazing how sound, you put it on something and it just starts getting louder again. Old Luthier showed me this trick. I thought it was a really good representation of how sound transfer works. It's just nothing, and then you have to build a box. So what are we doing in a guitar? The whole process here is making the guitar efficient. What can we do to make the guitar efficient? And then it's also your nails. It's a lot of other things that go into effect too. So technique. So the last part of the process, I always think I'm half done at this point. But I start finishing the guitars, so they have to be pore filled. So there's a lot of little pinholes and stuff in the woods on the back and sides and the neck. Top usually doesn't have pores. It's a non-porous wood. We have to fill all those gaps and everything. And just so we get a glassy, nice finish. And it does have an effect on the sound, believe it or not, when you do that. So. And it's all by hand. This is done. So French polish is actually a process of applying the finish with shellac, and it comes with techniques kind of like guitar. You have to take years to get good at it. So that's applying the shellac. You use a piece of cotton with a bunch of cheesecloths inside. The shellac goes inside that, and I use alcohol to kind of mix with that and apply the finish. Really, really small applications or coats, I guess you could say. Hundreds and hundreds of coats go on. So it can take up to like a week, week and a half to fully put the finish on the entire guitar, and then it takes another week to cure, and then you can buff it and finally string it up. And then the label goes in. That's one of the last things I do before I string it up. Sign it, date it, put a number on it. That was the old shop back when I had less hair. It's always fun when the customer comes and picks up the guitar. They've been waiting sometimes a year, 6 months, and they finally get to see it, and I get to hear them play it. And if they're local, it's a lot of fun for them to come in and do that. So this is just kind of some finished guitars I've done. We called this the rattlesnake rosette. I thought it was cool. Looked like a Diamondback rattlesnake to me.